Hello and welcome to the editorial analysis of the Hindu. Today we shall be discussing the editorial of the 10th of September. So coming to the first article, the Amazon fires an alarm that lacks proportion. Now basically, in this one particular article, the topic is important. We all know that Amazon fires is what is a type of a climate emergency, and definitely this issue is what is important. But this article is not providing us data which can be replicated. Now this is one thing that I would also like to guide students about. What happens is that sometimes just because a topic is important, I have seen students trying to cram all the details related to that topic. You have to show some restraint in your preparation as well. What is this restraint? Is that you have to decide the best material, prepare that material and revise it again and again, rather than just going deeper and deeper into that one particular topic which you will not be able to replicate in your exam. So this is one particular article. Indeed the topic is important. The context, that is the Amazon fires, is one of the most important topics, but this article provides us such details and such data that you will not be able to use it in your exam, and you have to avoid these kind of analysis. So that is one thing that I would like to make clear to all of you. So coming to the analysis, which I have particularly found important and replicable, and that is what I have extracted. Now first and foremost, what has been discussed here is with regards to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Now this, we all know, has released its 5th assessment report. This is because we have discussed an article on this before also, and that is where I have in very much detail discussed about the several aspects of this particular report, where I had told you how land change patterns is what has been discussed. That article was something that was very important, and I had recommended you all to keep a clipping of that one particular article. So if you haven't watched, please watch my previous videos on Amazon fire. That is where the basic or the gist of this issue is what I have discussed. Now basically there's only one point that has been highlighted which is new, and that new point is that particularly the report by the IPCC is focusing on the land change pattern as well as deforestation. It in his report has suggested that it is because of these tendencies that we have more and more episodes of global warming, and it is because of this that carbon dioxide concentrations have increased. But what is being analyzed here is that it is not only land change pattern, but it is also fossil fuels that are being burnt. And it is the fossil fuels which are contributing much more to the carbon dioxide emissions. Data is what has been given in this part of the editorial. This is the analysis that I am avoiding, because I don't think one can remember this data, and even if one does remember, I rarely believe you will have scope to produce it in the required word limit. So that is why I am avoiding the data. Another thing is that if there is a land change pattern because of which there has been an increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, that is what can be something that can be reversed. If deforestation has taken place, we can reverse it by further afforestation. But if fossil fuels have been burnt, then that is what cannot be reversed, and that is one important analysis that has been given here. Another thing that has been discussed in this article which is new is in the context of the global outrage. If you have an opportunity to discuss about nationalism versus globalization, that is where this topic will become as an important example. Basically, this was one issue because on which the global media was united. There was a global outrage that did come. But unfortunately, something else has also happened. What has happened here is that northern countries, particularly the European Union countries as well as US for that matter, it is being argued in the editorial that these countries were seen to be threatening the southern countries, primarily countries like Brazil. It is acceptable here, it is very much agreed in the editorial that the role that was played by Brazil, the government in Brazil, was something that was unacceptable. It was irresponsible, it cannot be denied. But the behavior of the northern countries was also something that was unacceptable, because this is what is amounting to a sort of a pressure tactics on the southern countries by the northern countries, and it is almost amounting to bullying. Another thing is that they had even issued threats of military intervention. So climate change, or for that matter environmental concerns as a positive factor for wars in countries, is something that is also emerging in the current time. This could be just the beginning of another new story altogether. So that is one idea that has been offered in the editorial, which I particularly found important. And lastly, the idea of this being a climate emergency. This is a key word, and that is why I included it also. If you have opportunity to discuss this issue, mention about this keyword. That is this particular event a type type of a global climate emergency is what definitely warrants some explanation, some analysis, and that is what is being called by several experts, and that is what has been discussed also. So these are the only 3 points that I personally felt could be extracted from this particular article. Otherwise, the article is full of facts which, in my personal opinion, one cannot replicate, and that is why I have not included that for discussion today. Coming to the second article, giving age-old ties a new shine. Indeed, a very, very important article, very, very relevant for us. This is context with regards to the recent visit of Prime Minister Modi to Russia, and this is particularly in the context of 3 countries, that is Russia, India as well as China. So that is what is important, or the importance of this particular article. So coming to the analysis, first and foremost, this triangle of relationship is what has been called as a strategic triangle. Keyword again, please use this in your discussion. This triangle of the 3 countries, Russia, India and China, is very, very strategic. Why? Because here in this particular triangle there is a balance of power that is taking place. China's ambitions, its global ambitions for expansion are what are rising, and this is something that is known to all. It is called as China's galloping regional ambitions in the editorial, and this is what is a concern not only for India, it is a concern for Russia also. And as a result of which, what happens is that when this partnership is taking place, a balance is wrong. For India, Russia with China is what is balanced, and for Russia itself, bringing India inside is another check on China's rise. So that is what is again something that is important and very, very important in the current time. So that is what has been analyzed. Another thing that has been discussed in the editorial is context with regards to the trade ties between India as well as Russia. Some data is what has been given here, and this is something that you should have at least some idea about. For instance, in the year 2017, trade between both India and Russia grew by 22%. Similarly, in the year 2019, trade is what grew by 17%. Later, it is being targeted that by the year 2025, trade is what should grow by approximately $30 billion. This is where all this data is what has been talked about. You should have at least some idea of the trade relation. It shouldn't be that trade between India and Russia is $30 billion. The target is that of $30 billion, and you are talking about $100 billion. Don't do this kind of blunder. Sometimes students do it. It shows your lack of preparation. So at least some basic idea of trade is what you should have in mind. There are several areas of cooperation. For example, in the context of Indian oil, India's oil sector is one where Russian companies are investing, and that is what has been talked about in the editorial. For example, the Rosneft company of Russia, it is the oil giant in Russia, has invested $12.9 billion in India's second largest private oil refiner, that is the Acer Oil. These are some examples. These are examples that you can discuss if there is scope. Otherwise, these examples are what are difficult to replicate because of the word limit constraint, but at least you should know the sectors where engagement is taking place. Another thing, we all know that there is a lot of engagement in the context of the petrochemical sector, and something that is very, very important is the butyl rubber, which is being worked upon both the countries. India is planning to import more and more butyl rubber, so these things are important. What basically I have seen is that largely when I have corrected papers in the context of international relations, and that is where I just see that usually students are talking the same thing despite the fact that whichever country has been asked about. For example, if I'll ask you the relationship between India and China, there again students will say that yes, there is huge amount of scope for engagement, there's scope for engagement vis-a-vis the oil sector. I will just have to replace the country and students will write almost the same thing. So that is why I feel that for getting more marks, at least some particular specifications related to one particular country will always give a good impression. Just like in the case of India, Pakistan, I had given you the example of gypsum that India was importing from Pakistan and cotton which India was exporting to Pakistan. Only this one example will show that the student has a little bit knowledge, deeper knowledge compared to the others, and this will fetch you marks. And similarly in the case of Russia, this term, that is the butyl rubber, this is what is important and it has been talked about so much in detail. Also the idea of halogenated butyl rubber, all of this is what is being traded, and this is what, if you will just mention it, you will definitely be rewarded. So this is what I want to convey, that try and bring about some details also. That is one important thing. Now coming back to the trade ties, there are trade that is taking place in the context of defense sector. Primarily you should know that Russia is the largest arms supplier for India, and now the agreement is what has been reached that payment is what will also be accepted in national currencies, and this is done primarily to circumvent US. We all know that US is pressurizing India not to import the S-400 missiles from a defense system from Russia, and in that particular context almost an agreement is what has been reached. So that is important. Next, Next, what has been discussed in this article, which is new, is the idea of the SCO, which is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Now basically, under the SCO, what is important is that it was Russia that played a major role in India being a part of the SCO, and this was something that was in the interest of India, because in that scenario what has happened is that the dominance of China in the SCO is what has now been reduced, and this is something that is in India's interest. Another important analysis is with regard to India as well as China relations. Now basically, India-China relations are tense, it cannot be denied, because we have a boundary dispute with China. China is a rising power, it's almost becoming a superpower just in the vicinity of India. China's closeness to Pakistan is something that is a concern for India. All of these are the irritants between India and China, and here Russia has a major role to play, because Russia will act as a balancing force between India and China, and this is something that is in India's interest, and that is what has been discussed. Also, something you should know about the Treaty of Friendship. Now the Treaty of Friendship is what India and Russia had signed way back in the year 1971, and at that point of time the idea was to counter the US-China rapprochement that had taken place at that point of time. So this is the Treaty of Foundation, the Treaty of Friendship is the foundation for India-Russia relations. So that is one thing that is important. These relations are now 4 decades old, and one of the deepest friendships that India has is with Russia. So that is what has been talked about. Also, something that is important is in the context of India-US. Now basically, in the context of India-US relationship, what is important is that despite the fact that US is pressurizing India not to import from Russia, US is also important for India. India does not wish to annoy US also. So India is seeking that India should get a waiver from Washington, and that is how India should import from Russia. Also, India needs US support for the United Nations Security Council, which is very much an important deal for India. That is what is in store in the context of India-US relation. Another thing is that even India has the importance of US in the context of Pakistan also, where India wants to ensure that some pressure is what is built on Pakistan. So that is where India-US relationship is important. But nevertheless, this particular summit level meet in Russia that took place between Prime Minister Modi as well as the President of Russia, Mr. Putin. What is important in this particular context is that a message is what has been conveyed, that India warming up with US is not a threat to India-Russia relation, and that is what is the entire analysis. The strategic triangle that is emerging is something that is very, very relevant, and I would suggest all of you all to talk about this if there is a scope for it. If a question does come, this is an important development. Also, Russia's role as a balancer between India and China is what is something new that has been discussed, and talk about this. So that is what is the entire analysis. The editorial is important in the context of the international relation aspect of general studies mains paper for Russia, India, China. So that is where the relevance is. And that's about this particular article, and that's about our discussion today. These are the only 2 relevant articles that I personally found were important. Another article on the Madras High Court issue is what I have just discussed yesterday, so that is what is the repetition, and these are the only articles which I personally found were relevant. So that's about our discussion today. I thank you all for watching the video.